Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Mental Muse 2.0, and I am going to talk to you guys. This is part 2 of the whole Jim Henson series. We had started it off with talking about Jim Henson, the memorialist, the man who escaped slavery, and so I decided to dedicate the first part to him, because considering that there's not a whole lot talked about him, and I believe that there is probably much more to his life, and I believe he deserved that spotlight. But because everyone knows about Jim Henson, the Jim Henson Company, of the puppeteer, Muppets, Sesame Street, you Disney, you guys all kind of know who he is, pretty much. Well, you should, anyways. So, before we get started, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I apologize if a lot of this is going to seem kind of repetitious, because I decided, instead of kind of picking it out and writing a whole report out for me to just read to you guys, I am just going to go straight from the sources. So some of the sources may repeating information, and so we're going to get into that, but I just want to let you guys know. We're first going to start with Wikipedia. They were talking about Jim Henson, but you know how everybody knows Wikipedia, is not always correct. It tries to be as correct as possible. Most people correct it, and the best way they know how. But what happens is that sometimes it comes off as some people will go in there, they'll change up the information, and then some people come back in there and then re-change it right back. And so that's why a lot of schools and things like that don't use Wikipedia as a credible source to rely upon. But in this situation, I believe it does work very well to give you a good starting foundation, a good starting point, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to end up going from there to talking about, especially in the Washington Post, and then we're going to go into other biographies about him. But the reason I wanted to focus on this, you're probably thinking, why suddenly now I want to talk about Jim Henson? Okay, the reason why was because, one, he just technically had a birthday. Two, he is also a very prominent, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, an inspiration, a muse, something like that in my life growing up as a child. Especially if you grew up in anywhere between the 60s to the 90s, you knew Jim Henson. You knew the person behind the Muppets. You knew the person behind Sesame Street characters. You knew the person who created it, and it's almost like equivalent to George Lucas with Star Wars. People talk about George Lucas the same way as the same people that talk about Jim Henson. Although it's typically two separate people most of the time. People who like Jim Henson and his work, sometimes they're not always very receptacle and understand the whole point of Star Wars, so they don't really understand George Lucas. But in the same light, some people will take George Lucas's work and they don't understand the child nature of Jim Henson's work. So I believe this is why I'm getting in. I think I grew up with both. I guess I was introduced to both, but even though I did watch Star Wars when I was younger in the 80s, I'm not going to go that far deep, but I think I only did because there was some, fantasy, fanatically way of how things on, and it seemed almost kid appropriate, but yet you feel like you're watching a grown up movie. It wasn't a cartoon. It wasn't nothing like that. Like Jim Henson, his is all with Muppets, and some of it is also cartoonish. If you grew up watching Muppet Babies was an animation of the Muppets. So, you knew about that. And you knew Sesame Street, all the Muppets are pretty much done by the Jim Henson Company, and he co-founded that. So, so I just think, I'm not a huge fan of George Lucas and a Star Wars thing. Yes, I love Baby Yoda, Grogu, whatever you want to call him. I don't like the name Grogu. It sounds I think Baby Yoda sounds cuter, and I have this sub personality trait of Baby Yoda, and that I use around my family members and so forth. So we play around with that. It's like I tap into that personality of a childlike, of an alien who is aware of human things and aware of human life, but has questions and so forth, and is acting like a toddler. And sometimes I play around with my daughter, and who is almost an adult, but she still thinks it's cute, you know what I mean? So I think it's a connection we have, and it really started off back in 2020. We were all stuck in quarantine, all that stuff, and I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna tap into it. And I was joking around with the voice, and it just became part of me. So as far as Star Wars goes, yes, I'm aware of the characters, yes, I'm aware of the storyline and everything. We watched almost all of them out there, but I am not I'm not a huge fan, I guess, of it. So if I hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'm more of a huge fan of Jim Henson, who did the Muppets and stuff like that, because I think the Muppets have taught us so much growing up, not with just Sesame Street, but also with any of the Muppet movies. We saw the personalities come through each character and everything. So, and I was always thinking, what mind, how did this come about? I mean, was he just laying in bed one day and decided, you know what, I want to connect with children, teach them things. I want to also, create these things. And where did this come from? How did this start? And yes, of course, you guys, you can look it up yourself and read it yourself, but I think it's easier just to kind of just talk about it and give you guys the information that I've come across. Now, if I missed anything, of course, comment down below, correct me if I'm wrong or whatever, that's fine. I'm open up to any additional information. So so let's get into it. Let's talk about Jim Henson. And for each source that I use, I will make sure to let you guys know. I will try my hardest to put down the links in the description so you can go check it out yourself, and then so forth. Some of it I may read, and some of it may, like I said, I'll read a whole bunch from one site, and then I'll go to another site, and they seem to kind of repeat the same information. I'll try to skip over anything that's repetitious, but otherwise, I'm just going to read it for what it is. So some parts may seem repetitious. So I apologize for that in advance. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. And while you're at it, before we get too deep into this, hit that subscribe button, go and hit that like button, because you're going to like this and all this, and then go ahead and hit that share button, because I know you guys have got some friends out there who love Jim Henson as much as I do. And as you guys know from my last video, the title of it, The Tale of the Two Jim Hensons, that was part 1. Part 1 was about the memorialists, and this is going to be part 2. I don't know if I'm going to make a part 3. It depends on how long this video goes, but we will go from there. I'm going to try to keep it my best. I'm going to try my hardest to keep it under an hour, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so sit back, relax, get something to drink, and prepare to learn all about Jim Henson and his imagination. So, Jim Henson, according to Wikipedia, James Maury Henson was born in September 24th, 1936. He was an American puppeteer, an animator, an actor, and filmmaker who achieved worldwide notability as the creator of The Muppets. Henson was also well known for creating Fraggle Rock, which was between 1983 to 1987, and as the director of The Dark Crystal in 1982 and The Labyrinth in 1986. He was born in Greenville, Mississippi, and raised in both Leland, Mississippi, and University Park, Maryland. Henson began developing puppets in high school. He created Sam and Friends, which was in 1955 through 1961. It was a short-form comedy television program on WRC-TV while he was a freshman at the University of Maryland, College Park, in collaboration with classmate Jane Nebel. Henson and Nebel co-founded Muppets Incorporated, now the Jim Henson Company, in 1958, and married less than a year later in 1959. Henson graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in home economics. In 1969, Henson joined the children's educational television program, Sesame Street. In 1969 till present, Sesame Street is still happening, where he helped to develop Muppet characters for the series. He and his creative team also appeared on the first season of the sketch comedy show Saturday Night Live in 1975 until present. He produced the sketch comedy series The Muppet Show, which went on from 1976 to 1981. During that period, Henson revolutionized the way puppetry is captured and presented in video media. He won fame for his characters, particularly Kermit the Frog, Ralph the dog, and the characters on Sesame Street. During his later years of his life, he founded the Jim Henson Foundation and Jim Henson's Creature Shop. He won the Emmy Award twice for his involvement in The Storyteller in 1987 to 1988 and The Jim Henson Hour in 1989. Henson died in New York City at age 53 from toxic shock syndrome caused by strep. At the time of his death, he was in negotiations to sell his company to the Walt Disney Company, but talks fell through after his death. He was posthumously awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1991 and was named a Disney legend in 2011. His earlier life, James Maury Henson was born on September 24th, 1936, in Greenville, Mississippi, the younger of two children of Betty Marcella. In 1904 to 1972, and Paul Ransom Henson from 1904 to 1994, and agronomist for the United States Department of Agriculture. Henson's older brother, Paul Ransom Henson Jr., from 1932 to 1956, died in a car crash on April 15, 1956. He was raised as a Christian Scientist and spent his early childhood in nearby Leland, Mississippi, before moving with his family to University Park, Maryland, near Washington, D.C., in the late 1940s. He remembered the arrival of the family's first television as the biggest event of his adolescence. Being heavily influenced by radio ventriloquist Edgar Bergen and the early television puppets of Burr Tillstrom on Kukula, Fran and Ollie, and Bill and Cora Barr, he remained a Christian Scientist at least until his 20s, when he taught Sunday school. But he wrote to a Christian Science church in the 1970s to inform them that he was no longer a practicing member. According to many of you guys, if you're not sure, after this is just me talking right now, but I just want to let you guys know, many of you guys don't realize how much of an emphasis Fraggle Rock was on a lot of us 80s babies. You know, we were born, I personally was born in 82. Okay, guys, you can do the math. I was born in 82. But I remember growing up with Fraggle Rock. I remember watching it, even though it went on until 1987. And I had just started kindergarten. So that was even though I had barely was at the age with psychologists would say remembering things, I remember watching Fraggle Rock well after the 87. Maybe they were reruns, who knows, but I remember watching it. And I remember the only way you could watch Fraggle Rock, though, was if you had cable. It was on HBO, I remember. I remember watching The Dark Crystal. Now, Dark Crystal came out in 82. I was just born, but I remember being introduced to it when I got a little older, and I remember being introduced to the Labyrinth, even though I was 4 years old when Labyrinth came out. If you know Labyrinth, you know David Bowie, he was part of it, and all that stuff. All three of just those three, even though Fraggle Rock is a show, those three shows/movies were very vital. They taught so much, especially Dark Crystal. Dark Crystal taught us the power of good and evil. It was almost, this is where people begin to believe that it was almost like a child's version of Star Wars. I mean, you have, you have a main character who's going after, has to get the shard and restore the crystal so we can get the land back from the bad guys, and of course the bad guys don't like it, and therefore they fight back and forth. It's just like the Jedis and so forth. And I think it's almost like it, but the artwork that goes into it, I know Henson didn't do it all, but the artwork that goes into that is fantastic. Same thing with the Labyrinth. The Labyrinth was there was a lot of glitter, it seemed like, involved, but I think it was a play on the lighting. But the Labyrinth, to get David Bowie into that was a smart move. I believe having him involved in the Labyrinth really skyrocketed. I think, but one of the major, I think probably part of the contract to have David Bowie playing it, because David Bowie was at the top of the charts at that point. And to get him to be a part of a child movie, I think he would have to be, the contract was, I get to write my music. I get to sing my music. And so I think, and it worked out perfectly, because actually the music was great in that movie. The music actually really was catchy. It was it really does stick in your head. My daughter and I recently watched the 40th anniversary of it, I believe, in the theaters, and it was like, oh my gosh, when we watched it in the theaters, because I've never seen it in theaters, because it came out in 86, I was only 4, so here was my chance to see a movie that I grew up watching, and I have the DVD of it and everything, and I thought, it was part of my childhood, and I introduced it to my child when she was younger, so she was aware of the movie, and she loved it. And now that she's almost pretty much an adult now, we were like, when we found out it came out that they were going to do a special showing at the theater, we were like, there's our chance to see it on the big screen. And we bought t-shirts. We sat there. We fangirled it. I mean, it was great. So honestly, I think it got stuck in our heads. We listened to the soundtrack on the way going to. We kept singing the songs. We were dancing in our seats. We were being crazy, but I think we weren't the only. The crazy thing about it is we weren't the only ones. There was other people there. We know y'all. They were fanging it. They were going out of their minds because they saw the type of people that were there watching this movie were obviously my age or maybe a little older who remember this, and some of them have older children that were there and they were watching it for the first time too, and they were like they remembered it. Like we're a collective family, and that's what it felt like. It was like, here's our family, we're having a family reunion watching it. And not only that, it's sad because David Bowie's now passed away, that it's like it was almost like paying homage to him as well. And then moving forward to him talking about where he created Sam and Friends. Now, Sam and Friends is it was a short form comedy television program. It was live action puppet sketch comedy series. It led into the Tonight Show, created by puppeteer Jim Henson and his wife. Eventually, at the time they were working on, they were friends, but then eventually they were dating and stuff. And then eventually he kind of proposed to her, which is great because she shared that same creative mindset, which is kind of awesome to have. You can bounce ideas off of 24/7 because you're together. But it was aired live. And it was aired live, so you cannot mess it up. It was live twice daily, and it was only locally. So if you lived in Washington, D.C. area, and it was in black and white, and later on it did go on to being in color when color television came out, but it was only in the D.C. area. And Sam and Friends is a very interesting, group. They did a lot of shows, but the whole point was the series kind of focused mostly on Sam, a bald-headed, big-eared human who escaped the harshness of everyday life with the help of abstract friends that he created based on parts of his life. Like his friends included Yorick, Harry the hipster, Professor Madcliffe, Chicken Liver, and a lizard-like character named Kermit, who later evolved into Kermit the Frog, which is kind of crazy, how this the evolution of Kermit the Frog. He wasn't always a frog. He was actually some lizard-like character. And so that's kind of interesting how that turned into it. He actually did evolve. No pun intended. If you believe in evolution, that's kind of interesting. But, yeah, early in its run, the show mostly featured the puppets lip singing to popular songs of the day. Like, if the song was by a female performer, the puppet who would wear a wig while singing. Later, former sketches were drawn up, many spoofing well-known television shows at the time, including the series that follows Sam and Friends in the Washington market, which was called the Huntley-Brinkley Report. The popular early sketch that would use often in subsequent Henson productions was Glowworm, in which is a character, often Kermit, would nibble on what looked like a worm, but would ultimately turn out to be the tongue or nose of the monster Big V, like the letter V, who would devour him. Bob Payne once substituted for Jim Henson while he was in Europe, and Jerry Jalhol also worked on the show toward the end of its run, where he substituted for Jane Henson. Starting in 1959, advertisements for SK Meats would appear at the end of the show, as well as Wilkins Coffee. The latter featured two Muppets created exclusively for the spots, Wilkins and Wontkins. While Payne, Joel, and Jane Henson all puppeteered in the series alongside him, Jim Henson provided all the voices himself, unless the voices were taken from a record. So it's really kind of crazy. So we have this Sam and Friends. Okay, we have Sam, who is the main character, performed by Henson. He's a bald-headed humanoid character who is the main character. Only footage of him lip-syncing to a song currently survives. His head was made from paper mache. Kermit, performed also by Henson, is a reptilian amphibious creature. He was prominently featured in many sketches that led to popularity, though he would not be referred to as a frog until almost a decade later. Harry the Hipster, who's also performed by Jim Henson, was a beatnik. So, beatniks were members of the social movement in the mid-20th century who subscribed to an anti-materialistic lifestyle. They rejected the conformity and the consumerism of mainstream American culture and expressed themselves through various forms of art, such as literature, poetry, things like that. Almost think about the people that went to the bars and would listen to poetry night, spoken word, and would sit there and snap, or they were into mod. They weren't into the mainstream media. They weren't into all that. So Harry the Hipster, he was a hipster. Which we still use today. We call those people hipsters, people that go into, go to Starbucks and they're just like, oh, I read this book and I'm just different from everybody else, but I'm so much better and I'm smarter and things like that. That's basically what a hipster attitude is. So Harry the Hipster is a beatnik. He resembles a black sock puppet with shades and spoke in a hip slang. Harry was one of the first Muppets designed and built by Jim Henson. Yorick, performed by Jim Henson as well, is a voracious puppet that resembled a rock head. He literally just looked like a rock. Yorick has been known for appearing with supporting Muppets, whom he would attempt to eat. His puppet was made of paper mache with a tube in his mouth that allowed him to swallow things. Professor Madcliffe, also performed by Jim Henson, is a tall-headed professor with big eyes and a mustache. He had a loud and energetic personality. He made most of his appearances in commercials. Then there's Chicken Liver. Oh, that sounds fun. Chicken Liver. But also performed by Henson, is a humanoid character with a tall head and a big nose. He has been described as a dramatic storyteller and believed that the show lacked culture. Hank and Frank, two bald humanoids that served as the show's bit players, they took on the roles of Chet Huntley and David Brinkley in a spoof interview with Kermit. Mushmelon, a small yellow monster with a permanent grimace. He was a favorite among younger audiences. Icky Gunk, a sinister-looking green snake-like character sporting a pair of arms. Henrietta, performed by Jerry Joel, is a pink female creature of indeterminable species. Moldy Hay, a human character with orange-red skin, a big nose, and hair over his eyes. Omar, performed by Henson, a beaked humanoid with a papier-mâché face. He was described as the nomadic type. Pierre the French Rat, performed by Jim Henson. He was one of Jim Henson's first puppets. Pierre was embodied as a puppet made from plastic wood. And then Bernice, performed by Bob Payne, which is just the female humanoid. So, I mean, you have Jim Henson's playing majority of almost all of the characters. And then, I mean, it's crazy, though. I mean, there are several episodes that are still surviving. You can probably, you may get like, I don't know if they would be on YouTube or not, but they go, I think there's 2 from 1959, there's 1 from 1960, let's see, about 5 left from 1961. There's a few songs that were sung as well, from 1959, 1 from 1961, 1960. There's another one that we don't know. Maybe it's around the 1950s, probably 59, 58, so around there. There's 2 more in 1959, and then 1 more in 1960. So apparently, though, yeah. So I mean, it's crazy that this he came up with this idea. I mean, the running time is only 5 minutes per sketch and the episode. So I mean, that's why there's like over thousands of episodes, but there's not that many that are left still out there somewhere. I'm pretty sure maybe the Wayback Machine, or you would have to really look and try to find. But yeah, there's still a lot still out there. But it was only primarily in Washington, D.C., so yeah, it would be kind of hard to find it unless you live in Washington, D.C., or you know somebody who's there. Washington, D.C., I'm pretty sure somebody around in that area, he could probably help you out, because you maybe on Reddit or something like that. Maybe if you post on that, maybe somebody will have something. I mean, back then, sometimes, I mean, even in the 50s, I don't even know if VCRs were even around. I doubt they were. So, I mean, you couldn't even record, these shows. And so, I don't know how you would even get a hold of them unless somebody who worked at, like, say, the news station, who worked at the radio station or the TV station, and they have copies and they have access to the footage, the history. So, yeah. So, I think that's kind of interesting, though. But he worked on that. He created, it's called Sam and Friends, the show, and it was from 1955 to 1961. So, it's kind of funny, though, but basically, when he met his wife, Jane, Jane, I mean, there's not a whole lot on her. Her name is Jane Ann Henson. Her maiden name is Nabelle. She was a classmate with Henson, and I guess they hit it off, and they decided to, get together. They decided, why not, let's get into doing puppeteering. Why don't we get into that? So I think they got it. Somehow they found their love for it, and that was what made them great together. And I think that's great, So they then both together, they co-founded the Muppets Inc. Now the Muppets Inc. is incorporated. It is it's the Jim Henson Company. It's formerly known as Muppets Inc. Also Henson Associates Incorporated, and then there's also Jim Henson Productions Incorporated, commonly referred to as Henson. It's just an American entertainment company. It's still located in Los Angeles, California. I mean, it's basically where all the magic happens. Yeah. So, it's crazy. When they co-founded Muppets Inc., which is now called the Jim Henson Company, They just a year later after doing that, I mean, they got married. I mean, in 1959, they suddenly got married, and they stayed together. They stayed married. And then Henson, he eventually graduated from the University of Maryland. He had a degree in home economics, which is actually kind of cool. I kept thinking home economics. I'm thinking home economics is like, was that really a thing? I would think he would be into. I thought it would be more into theater or artistry or something like that. But then I got to thinking, did the University of Maryland have back then had a program for puppeteering? They probably do now, but back then, I don't think they really did. I think they really just. I think the best you can do is home economics, which you would learn to sew and create. So I think this is what helps him create his puppets, of sewing the fabrics together and creating these humanoid type of puppets. I hate saying the word puppets over and over again, but it's hard to explain. But I think that's the only best way you can do it. I mean, we're used to, as kids, they say make a puppet. We always want to grab a sock. Well, obviously Henson did that. He probably did it when he was in high school. He had a puppet sock, and he just put googly eyes on it. Next thing you know, it's a person. Gave it a personality, a voice, and everything. Well. And when he learned how to sew properly, or learning how to textures and definitions and colors and things like that, I think he started getting, realizing he can expand on this and create all these different characters. And then all he had to do was come up with the personalities, call them up with names, come up with how are they going to act? How are they going to move? How are they going to speak? How's their attitude? Are they going to keep that same attitude? And then, and I'm pretty sure he bounces ideas off a bunch of people that actually helped him with this production with Sam and Friends. And I think, and his wife was a big part of that. I think she helped him out a lot with it. But ultimately, he obviously got the recognition for it, even though I do believe she should have gotten some kind of recognition. But so we do know, though, as we know that it started off when he joined from Sam and Friends, and then he joined Sesame Street. He went on from that point forward, and then we know that when he created some of these characters for Sesame Street, I want to do what would be called like a spinoff. I don't know, spinoff of this series. I may make it a different part of the evolution of the Sesame Street, like mainly the monsters. Like, how did they come up with, like, did Elmo come first, Cookie Monster come first, Grover, and so forth. And then, backtracking though, some of the characters that were on Sam and Friends, if you actually know, when I read earlier on these characters, and as I described them, many of them sound very familiar. If we can think about this, Sam is he's a bald-headed humanoid character, right? He's the main character. Well, if you think about Fraggle Rock, we have, the old man who had the dog. I can't remember his name at the top of my head, but we had him. He wasn't a puppet. He was a real life character, but he was pretty much kind of bald, and he was an old man, and he was one of the main characters. And then we had Kermit. Kermit wasn't in Fraggle Rock, but we did have some forms of frogs, like small baby frogs in backgrounds, and certain characters of some form. Then you got Harry the Hipster. Well, Harry the Hipster sounds just who was a black sock puppet with, shades, and he spoke in hip slang. That sounds a lot like, again, forgive me, I did not look up the names, but I'm pretty sure as I describe them, and if you know the characters of the Muppets, you'll know who I'm talking about. You had the band, and the band, the main guy that's in it, he's got the glasses, he's got the mustache, he's almost hipster like, but he's very like Woodstock. It's very Woodstock giving, and it's almost like it's a play off of a beatnik of who spoke in hip slang. He's like, hey man, just chill, that's how he talked. And then you have Yorick, which is really weird because he resembles a rockhead, but I mean, I can't think of another character that resembles him, but the name Yorick reminds me of someone who's maybe Russian or something like that. But it made me think of, because of this character, really absolutely, this character absolutely actually, I guess, would try to eat things and swallow things and so forth. I would think, that it came across like the chef, in the Muppets, the chef who will cook things and things like that. So I'm thinking, and his name was like Boris or something like that. But Yorick sounds very similar in the same, what do you call it? The same, I guess, from the same parts of the world, the common name, it sounds, I don't want to say Russian, but somewhere around that. And then you have Professor Mackleth. He's a tall-headed professor. He has big eyes, a mustache. He's a loud and energetic personality. That reminds me of Animal almost. He's got big eyes. He's loud. He's got a lot of energy and so forth. And then you have Chicken Liver, who is a humanoid character, tall head, a big nose. What Muppet character do you think has a big nose? Gonzo. Gonzo has been described as he's also a good storyteller. If you watch the Muppets Christmas Carol, we watch it every year. It's every Christmas Eve. That's just our thing. We've done it for, all my life I've done it pretty much, and I pass it on with my daughter as well. We do it every Christmas Eve. We watch it, and we sing the songs. We know the whole thing. It's just something about it. That'll be the last thing we watch before we go to bed at night, because it brings the childlike in our the energy before you go to sleep, and Santa's coming and so forth. But yeah, so Gonzo in that movie is a storyteller. He plays Charles Dickens. So I'm thinking, okay, he does show lack of culture, but at the same time, he had he didn't have so much of a big head, but he did have a big nose. He was weird. Then, of course, you did have other characters, but I can't think of really any the other characters, like Icky Gunk. They said a sinister, green-looking snake-like character supporting a pair of arms or whatever. That reminds me of Emmett Otter's Christmas. If you look at the bullies, I guess I want to say, they're a band, they're a gang, supposedly in the movie. I think some of these other characters really represent those characters. And then again, Moldy hay is very similar, also like animal, which is, you get the orange red skin, a big nose, hair resides, but that could also come off to being also the band leader as well, because he has the red hair. He's got a big nose, and he's got hair over his eyes as well. So I mean, that kind of comes off to it as well. So you have a lot of these, and then Pierre the French rat is still, instead of it being, we do have Rizzo the rat, but we also have, but Pierre is also a shrimp, and he is French. So I think they kind of took it, and they kind of, thought, well, Pierre will be a shrimp, but we'll still keep a rat, which will be Rizzo the rat. So, and then Bernice, which is a female humanoid, which could be Janice from the band, So she seems, or she could also be Miss Piggy. I mean, it could be either one, but because I think that's the only female character. I think all the others are male-like characters, or they're giving that off as male characters. But I think if you think about it, how he started, he really didn't go off too far from where he started. He did not, stray too far from the beginning. Like he just, all he did was took what he knew, and everything just kind of molded and enveloped, like snowballed, and took a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and let's just mix it up like it's clay. And I think it's just fantastic. He didn't waste the creativity, that he didn't just scrap it and said, nope, we're going to retire this puppet. They're gone and retired. No, he kept almost every puppet was still, some part of that puppet was still involved. Whether they took the eyes of one puppet and the mouth of another puppet and put them together and made a whole nother character, some way, in some form, they were still together. And that, I think, in itself is genius. And I think it's to say that it needs to be mentioned, because I think people think it's easy to do stuff like this, and I believe it's very difficult. And knowing that as an adult watching, I know logically these are just pieces of fabric, and people have got their hands up their butts and moving their mouths, but the child part of my brain is like, I connect. I understand it. And I think that's why, and I think Sesame Street, they saw this. When they watched Sam and Friends, they saw, we need this guy. We want to create a public television show that caters to kids, to help kids with everyday cultural life, things like that, with things going on around them, something that they can relate to. And who better yet than get the man that's behind this show, who knows what he's doing. He made it come alive. And I think that was just genius. That was the best thing that Sesame Street did ever, was to get with Jim Henson and have him help create these characters. So I think, honestly, to me, that is just, that's a great, to me, not only is it a great ending to this part, but it's a good beginning to where we need to start with next time. So on my next video, we will begin on part 3 of Jim Henson, the tale of 2 Hensons, but now we're talking about 1. But I wanted to make sure I'm still going to probably call it the tale of 2 Hensons, because I believe Jim Henson, the one who was enslaved, I believe that he himself as well, if given the opportunity, I think he would have done greatness in his life as well. But anyways, with that being said, guys, I think we're going to stop with this part 2 here. We will start, I guess we'll pick up where we left off at next time. I don't know when I'm going to post the next video on this as far as this series goes. I'm about to post more other videos here in a minute, so some other topics. So but this one definitely, this will be part 2 of the Tale of the Two Hensons, and I hope you guys enjoy it so far. We're going to pick up, I think we're going to go into talking about when he got hired at Sesame Street, because now that we already went through Sam and Friends, we're going to get into talking about Sesame Street a little bit. And that one itself, once we get into that, then we're going to get also into the Muppet Show, and then eventually we're going to end it with some of the people that played the voices of some of these characters, and why they were always the same people, why they were so dedicated to the Henson Company, but not just probably for fame and money, but they were also in it for because they believed in it. And we are going to talk about, basically Disney's ownerships, the right ownerships, and yeah. And then that's pretty much it. And I think once we get into all that, after that, I will probably tie it up with a separate video. I don't know if I'm going to connect it with this one. I'm going to go into the evolution of the Sesame Street monsters, because have you ever wondered which monster came first, and where did it come from? Like, how did they start off with it being? Because every time I turn around and I hear about Sesame Street, they've added another puppet, and it's usually either another monster or another type of non-humanoid creature. And I'm just wondering, how and why and what's their purpose. And so we'll get into that. So guys, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I said so much, and I apologize if I stumbled a lot. Like I said, I do not have a script in front of me. Maybe I should start doing that. I don't know, but I feel like eventually over time I probably will. But right now, this one I'm just kind of going off of what I'm finding and reading it straight from the good old internet, So I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this video with people that might be interested. Who knows? And if you got anything you want to add to it, did I miss anything? If you're old enough, did you watch Sam and Friends? Are you from the DC area? I mean, what do you know about Jim Henson? Comment down below. Let me know. I'm open to being educated and re-educated, and yeah. So, with that being said, guys, have a great day, and I hope you guys stay tuned and wait for part 3. Bye now.